Welcome back to What the Hype, where this week we are inviting you to go down, down, down the witch's road to talk about Agatha All Along with us. I am Laura. I'll be your host for this week. And just going to give a brief spoiler warning here at the top of the episode. Everyone on the panel has seen Agatha All Along, but a lot of the story beats and the plot of Agatha All Along also contains spoilers for another Marvel TV show, WandaVision. So if you have not seen either of these shows and you really, really don't want to be spoiled, go watch those shows and then come back to us later. Or if you don't care and you just want to know what happens, this is the right episode for you. But before we get into it, I do want to introduce our panel. So Eric and Pam are here. Thank you both so much for joining me this week on our little jaunt into like gothic Wizard of Oz.
Ooh.
Is really what the show feels like, at least in part.
For sure.
And then also wanted to welcome back Marc. Marc is my significant other. And beyond that, he is also our resident Marvel expert. So he's here to help guide the discussion and add a lot of different insights that, you know, maybe the three of us regulars don't have because we're not as deep into the Marvel lore as Marc is. Marc is going to be this episode's actually guy when it comes to pointing out like gaps in the story that I might have missed or important details that I may not be picking up on as I lead us through. So really, really excited to have you here with us as well, babe.
Of course, I have to do the glasses thing when I do it too.
Yes, please. Yes, please, please.
Well, this is our first formal episode focusing on a Marvel property, but we are no strangers to the MCU. You can actually follow us on YouTube. We are What the Hype podcast on YouTube, and you can see our reaction to the Deadpool and Wolverine movie back in July. We are all pretty well seasoned when it comes to the world of Marvel, so I have no doubt that we're going to be focusing on other Marvel properties that are coming here in the next couple of years. Just so happens that timing-wise for the episode, Agatha All Along was really the best opportunity for us to have that intro to Marvel episode, which is definitely going to be very witchy and spooky season themed, and which I love. To give a little bit of like a TLDR here, that is kind of spoiler free. We are going to start getting into some spoilers here soon. So again, if you don't want to be spoiled, probably not the episode for you. But Agatha All Along is, because it is the latest entry to Marvel Television, has a lot of the background of the world of Marvel, specifically the MCU in it. And it really is helpful, like I mentioned, to have watched, at the very least, WandaVision to be able to fully appreciate this show. So I just wanted to ask everyone going in, how much Marvel background do we all have, or did we all have before we watched Agatha All Along?
Yeah, for me, I am a few films behind. It's easy now, I think, in the current era to get distracted and not catch them all. But the last MCU film I think I saw was Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and that featured Wanda Maximoff's post WandaVision, Wanda Maximoff too. So I feel like that was also a good sort of primer for just finding the state of things in Agatha All Along. And I didn't feel while watching Agatha All Along that I had missed anything from current events or otherwise since.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a pretty good foundation to have going into this show. What about you, Pam?
Pretty up to speed on the MCU, I think. I'm trying to think about what the last movie I saw was. Was it Spider-Man? Was the Spider-Man the last one? I tend to keep up with the Marvel properties that end up on the big screen because I just think that they're a fun movie-going experience. So most likely I've seen everything that's come out in theaters. But I was realizing and preparing for this discussion that I think in terms of Marvel TV over on Disney Plus, I was doing pretty well through the first phase. So kept up through, I think She-Hulk was like the last of the first phase of the Marvel TV stuff. But this newer phase has not really piqued my interest very much. It just kind of seems like the storytelling has slowed down, and some of the shows have just been like not great overall. So it's been kind of like pulling teeth. I'm having to put in the effort to watch some of these, and so that's why I haven't really kept up. So I was a little like dubious about Agatha all along, but just like the trailer really won me over. The D23 panel stuff looked super cool, and I loved that, like what Laura was saying about it being like kind of like a witchier Wizard of Oz with like this campy music element to it. I was like, okay, I really hope that this is as good as it looks. And yeah, so I was excited that it ended up being a great show to tune into every week.
I will say that the show was good comfort for me the last
Mhm.
couple of days leading into, sort of this election season. It felt really
Yeah.
good to binge. I did it in 3 days of 3 episodes each, and it was a perfect bite-sized way of consuming the show.
Yeah. No, I can totally resonate with that because, of course, the show or the season just wrapped up last week. So I think a lot of us were catching up on the season going into this week. Definitely a stressful week and good to have something to disassociate with a little
Mhm.
bit. But Pam, you actually touched on something that I think is a really important part of the conversation when it comes to Marvel, because Marvel, I think we can all admit, even the Marvel obsessed among us can admit that Marvel has been on the struggle bus lately. And I mean, it really feels like I should hand this over to you, Marc, because you're going to put this much more eloquently than me. But Marvel's been on the struggle bus since the Infinity Saga ended, basically. Like they've just not been doing a great job of orienting themselves. So babe, I actually wanted to ask you first, like going into Agatha All Along, what were you expecting to see? And as a Marvel superfan, what was the bar for you to measure whether that show was actually going to be a return to form for Marvel or whether it was going to be more of the same, like siloed story that doesn't really affect anything else?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that you're absolutely right, and I've talked about this before, but like Marvel, ever since the Infinity Saga and since that ended, because they were trying to start a new saga in such a weird time. Like there was COVID, like there was the writer strike. It really like there was a lot of things that were like affecting how they were setting up their stories. Plus, they just got off of a huge success, so they kind of felt like we can just greenlight stuff, and we're just going to greenlight all these stories, and we're just have people write them, and that's it. But the thing that kind of made the first saga of Marvel so magical is you had a very tight knit group of writers writing everything, right? Like they introduced like so many new writers in this next phase, and like whereas I'm sure those writers can do a great job, they're not as intimately familiar with the characters than the people who've been writing them for the past however many years. So you had a lot of stories that didn't really feel connected to others. Like Multiverse of Madness was supposed to be the sequel to WandaVision, but like there are certain things in Multiverse of Madness that you're just like, did they watch WandaVision? Because this does not really match. Like, where's Vision in Multiverse of Madness? Like,
Yeah.
right?
Even
Like,
Elizabeth Olsen, who plays Wanda Maximoff, called that out in interviews for the movie, where
hmm
she was like, "Did they even know what we did in WandaVision?" Because there
yeah,
are
Mm.
ways that that movie directly contradicts
yes,
the character development that happened in WandaVision.
yes. And granted, like, I, I like Multiverse of Madness. I love Raimi. Sam Raimi's one of my favorite. He's great. But like it was very clear that they were kind of so excited to have Sam Raimi on board. They were like, just Raimi, just do what it is you do, and like don't really worry about letting this fit into a bigger narrative. Because like even they didn't really address anything that happened in that movie. Like they didn't really. besides being like, oh, she's not here anymore, kinda, maybe, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, so like it's not like you have that same level of cohesion that a lot of these earlier stories had, where it's like this story directly relates to this story. Like Civil War clearly happened before Spider-Man Homecoming, because you see like the ramifications of Civil War play out in Homecoming, where Peter's trying to figure out how to be a new hero, right? Like you see the continuation of that story. But a lot of these stories feel a little bit more disconnected. Like Moon Knight, great show, didn't feel like it was in the MCU at all. It could have been any show that I watched, and it would have been fine.
Yeah, I
It's
wonder
too
if that
bad they
also
did
is the
that.
struggle between going between TV and movie properties too.
Well, I mean,
Mm,
Loki killed it. Loki was great.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
but I
Yeah.
found
Loki.
season 2 hard to keep up with, and I
Hmm.
will say too that like going back to Multiverse of Madness, I think everybody was expecting the Loki the show to play more of a role in Multiverse of Madness. I know I
Mm-hmm.
rewatched Loki season 1 before Multiverse of Madness came
Hmm.
out, and it turns out it didn't have to do that because it
Yep.
had nothing to do
Yep.
with the plot of that movie.
And
So
and you've heard multiple times writers come out and be like, I didn't know this was the plan. Like the writer that
yeah.
did Quantumanium, Ant-Man 3, straight up was like, I didn't know that Kang was supposed to be the big bad of this whole phase. I just thought he was the big bad for this one movie. And I'm like,
Whoops.
oof. Yeah, that's oof. Like, you
Hmm.
can't, like, the movie got released and they thought that, like, that should have been squashed in the writer's room. That should have been like,
Which
oh, no,
is
no, no, no.
which is wild because then you have like even casual fans like me, or like like I work in pop culture. I think people that listen to the show already know this. Like if I'm looking up background information of something like Quantum Mania, the first thing you read about is how he is such an integral part of like Ant-Man's story, right?
Hmm.
So you have people that haven't even read the comics that are already like primed for that. And the fact that like it seems like nobody that is spearheading this new slate has done even like an ounce of research is
And it's
Well,
not
hard.
great.
could it
And
have
Yeah,
it's
also
not
hard
to
been
say
because,
that
due
they
to
haven't
the
done any, but it's like it just seems like that it should be relatively obvious.
yes.
And then you also are kind of wondering if maybe they've jumped the shark a little bit behind the scenes, like they're keeping too many things close to the chest, which happens a lot in Hollywood, especially happens a lot in terms of like what they're doing over at Marvel. It's like you gotta give a little more so that
Mm,
all of these things are more
damn.
cohesive, to your point.
Like the first saga. The first saga was a perfect example where like everything just
Hmm.
kind of fit. Like even the movies
Yeah.
that weren't great, like it's not like you watched Thor 2, which is like the worst one of that
Yeah.
entire saga. Which I mean, no hate, like it's fine, but like it is one of the weakest ones. But when you watch that, you're not like, wait, what's happening? Who's that person?
Yeah.
Like, where did this person come from? Like, it's pretty clear where it takes place. Like, they almost make it so you don't have to watch everything. You can just be like, oh, I remember seeing that guy in Avengers, and yeah, his brother's kind of, kind of a jerk. So
Yeah.
cool, like I get it. But like now you're like, wait, who's this person? I thought Kang was supposed to be an Ant-Man, but didn't that Kang get got? So who's this person? Like what? There's so many different cooks in the kitchen now. There are too many cooks. Like there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And because of that, like you don't have the level, because like that's what makes Marvel movies, is that it gives you a window into what it's like to read comics. Like it basically
Mm.
brought comic book reading to the general population that normally
Yeah.
maybe wouldn't have,
It kind of
you know.
reminds me of like the 90s animated Marvel like TV
Hmm.
shows that I used to watch a lot because I grew up with three brothers.
Hmm.
So like especially like the Spider-Man ones are
Yep.
so true to the comics, which like I understand now
Hmm.
as somebody that like hasn't read the comics but has had to read up on like the cliff notes of the comics to get some context,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, everybody
I
was in
think
that
that like
show. Everybody
yeah,
showed up.
and but it's so well done, and it's
Hmm.
so like yeah, to that point it kind of felt like that's what they were going with
Yeah,
the way they
it
were moving
yeah,
everything
it just
in. But
feels
like
organic.
yeah, and like to bring it back to Agatha All Along, it's like I really enjoyed this show, but because of the state of how Marvel is operating now, like it also makes me wonder if it even matters in the grand scheme of where we're going next, because we've already seen how
Well,
the Eternals has become almost obsolete. And
Yeah.
actually, controversial opinion, I guess, I actually enjoyed the
Oh,
Eternals.
same
I
here.
liked Eternals too.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
it was a good movie. It's just, once again, it's hard to accept that the people of this planet that have aliens attacking all the time, their life's pretty much hell, a giant stone titan comes out of the ocean and no one's talking about it for years.
Yeah.
Like, people be like, wait, what's that giant thing out of the ocean that's like a giant hand? Like, they would be, after Thanos, they'd be like, what's that? Are
Excuse me?
you yeah, right.
Yeah.
Are you an evil person? Like,
well,
Just not going
you
to
know,
take care of that, the elephant in the
yeah.
room.
I will say Agatha All Along, like WandaVision, I think benefits from being largely contained. With WandaVision, you did need to understand sort of where those characters had been to appreciate sort of the types of conversations, especially when things got tough. But Agatha All Along, I didn't feel that I needed to have seen the last 6 Marvel films,
No.
or any of the 34 to really appreciate what ended up being a very feminist, badass, fun, exciting show. Like, yes, you want something that's made as part of a larger whole to be cohesive. You want it to be done well, but I don't think that whether it was cohesive with the whole means that Agatha was done well or not. I think it was for completely unrelated reasons.
I mean, honestly, I think it was very cohesive. Like, it clearly shows, like, this takes place at this time. Yes, the things that happened before happened. That's really all you need. Like, you don't
Yeah,
need
but
like,
Yeah.
it's tied to the previous phase, to your point. So
yes.
then you're kind of wondering, where does this fit in to the current phase that we're going into, if at all?
Yeah, like, it's clear that this happens after the events of WandaVision and after the
Mm-hmm.
events of Multiverse of Madness. Which honestly, that's enough. Because that already shows you that Spider-Man already happened. Because they reference Spider-Man No Way Home in
That's a good
Multiverse of
point, yeah.
Madness.
Mm.
So it kind of gives you a pretty good, like, this is the general area where this takes place. And they give you, like, time representation in there. Like, hey, 5 years later, this happened, or 5 years ago, this happened.
Yeah.
So they give you a pretty clear, like, hey, this is where this happens. And they do reference certain people. They introduce a lot of new characters, which I love, a lot of new concepts, which I love. But, like, yeah, I think they did a good job. There was at no point where like, it's not like all of a sudden some random character comes back and they completely repurpose them, and you're like, wait, who's this person? They were in WandaVision, but this isn't who. Like, Agatha was who she was in WandaVision, and the events of Multiverse of Madness did take place in some capacity, and they're somewhat aware of it, which is enough. That's fine.
Yeah.
That was
That's
good
fine.
enough for me.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Well,
Unlike Moon
getting
Knight.
oh yeah.
Just
Well, getting
wherever.
into some of the 411 on Agatha, kind of like we mentioned at the top here, Agatha All Along is actually the second installment of a 3-part television story arc. So WandaVision was the first, Agatha All Along is the second, and Vision Quest, which will, be helping us understand what the hell happened to Vision after WandaVision. That will be coming. I think I saw that was 2026.
I saw it was a
looked at the
temporary
slate.
title too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just excited because I've really enjoyed Paul Bettany in all the Marvel films.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in WandaVision, actually. It felt like he got time, and that was lovely.
Yeah. Well, and for anyone who may be following along with this, just so they have that like high level overview of like where the hell does this show even fit into the Marvel zeitgeist? WandaVision, which takes place before Agatha All Along, takes place after the events of Avengers Endgame, and it chronicles the lengths to which Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, goes to in order to get her happily ever after Vision's death in Avengers Endgame. Or Infinity War, excuse me. There's a lot of time travel in that. So I was like, wait, was it Endgame? Was it Infinity War? I don't remember. But anyway, she ultimately uses her powers to take over the town of Westview, New Jersey, and she casts the town's residents in a real life sitcom that they're all trapped in. So this is where she comes to meet Agatha. Of course, Agatha is not introduced as Agatha originally. She's introduced as Agnes. And just as a regular Westview resident, it becomes clear pretty quickly that there's something up with her. And it turns out that she is indeed Agatha Harkness, who is a dark witch who is really seeking out Wanda and her powers with some nefarious purposes in mind. Although I think we might have gotten some answers as to why she was doing that in Agatha All Along. Agatha All Along picks up after the events of WandaVision, with Agatha being the only Westview resident still living under Wanda's hex spell and living her life acting out sitcom scenarios. The first episode is very much, themed after, what is that? The mayor of
Easttown.
Mayor of Easttown. I was like, is it Easttown,
or like
Westtown?
True Detective-ish, or just the country road version of the Witch's Road that they released for that. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah. And Agatha is freed, and she soon encounters a random teenager whose name she can't confirm, because he has been placed under a sigil to protect his identity. So anytime he speaks his name to her, she cannot see the way his mouth moves, nor can she hear it. And Teen is ultimately seeking Agatha out to get her help finding the Witch's Road. And we're going to get into a little bit of lingo here before we dive deeper into this show. But first, going to take a quick break. I think some radioactive spiders might have gotten loose in the studio. So we need to check for that to make sure nobody got superpowered in the last 5 minutes. And we'll be right back. And we're back. Okay, so quickly getting into some lingo that is really helpful to know going into this show, because the show, it does do a lot of setup. I feel like after the initial setup, it moves pretty quickly. So it's good to have these things in mind. So The Witch's Road, we've mentioned this a few times here, but it is a song and a place. It is this mysterious, mythical dimension in the multiverse that is only accessible to magic users. And we learn in Agatha All Along that in order to enter the Witch's Road, a coven must perform a ritual which involves singing the incantation, this song, to enter the road. I already mentioned the sigil. We know the sigil is placed on Teen to protect his identity. So initially, we don't know who he is, and none of the witches we meet in the series know who he is, or at least that's what we think. We learn that there are different types of witches, like green witches, protection witches, potion, spirit, and divination witches. This is very important because in order to form a coven, you have to have a variety of different witches to be able to do that and get on the road. And finally, I think an important call out is the Salem 7. This is the coven that was actually formed by the daughters of the Salemites. That was Agatha Harkness's original coven, which included her mother, that Agatha wiped out. So the daughters of her mother's original coven are not too pleased with old Agatha.
And real creepy. They're real creepy.
Yeah. Had to watch that part with the lights on, not gonna lie.
Yeah. Was it just like the way they move? I found the way they moved creepy.
I could just tell that they were gonna start jump scaring us.
Yeah.
You know, with like how they popped up, and I was like, okay, let me turn the lights on for this.
Yeah, they got one good one in. They got one good jump scare, and I'm like, okay, that was well done.
Everybody gets one.
Yeah, because I hate it when they dial up the spookiness, like, oh, jump scares like crazy, and it's like, okay, guys, like, you can have them just be imposing and be kind of like, ooh, they're creepy. I feel uncomfortable. That's fine. Like, I don't need to watch Insidious every time they're on the scrreen. Like,
and to that point, cool. I loved the look. I loved that they looked like otherworldly, because it, like, the implication is they've been alive since probably the Salem witch trials were happening. Sure. So
yeah, and they've also been
now
like
they've just
consumed.
become like kind of
revenge.
like almost other being, like, yeah.
Well, Eric, you kind of talked about how you felt like this show was a bit of fresh air when it comes to Marvel properties, and not having it be so interconnected to the point where it felt like there was like 80 million unnecessary cameos. So it sounds like it was a positive viewing experience for you. Was the show what you were expecting?
That is sort of an interesting question. I think the show was better than I was expecting. I think that it because it dared to do new territory. So when I first saw that, the first episode is very focused on sort of Agatha's own personal TV show. And it was like, are we just getting like a straight up WandaVision sequel with like it's episodic based on different TV series that she could be? And I'm like, wow, the fact that it did that, took the time to do that in the first episode, but then completely got away from it and eventually started delving back into some of the lore that had been developed during WandaVision, seeing how the characters related. It was just a big puzzle box. It was a lovely puzzle box of a show. And the discoveries that were happening in real time, I felt like the show held our hands. Very often they would show previous instances of characters, things that characters said to reveal it. And I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all, always being shown, oh, yes, the character did say this, or this is what, this point in time connected to, or this is why Agatha knew all along who Teen was, or whatever. It's just the gradual reveals, I think, were satisfying. The mystery was satisfying, and the music was great. The acting was great. I was actually blown away by what the show was able to accomplish. I think partly because it had a very clear vision for what it wanted to be.
And to your point, like, I feel like that is the thing that Marvel properties have been missing. Like, if you look at all the good Marvel stuff that's happened in the past few years, it's all been by people who are either returning to be like, hey, I'm continuing this story. Like the Guardians, like James Gunn, like the last one was great. Like the Guardians 3 was amazing. Spider-Man No Way Home, amazing, right? But and Agatha All Along feels like that because it's the same writer. So like this is truly the sequel to WandaVision. Like Multiverse of Madness was like a weird pit stop that was fun, but it's like this, like that was a rest area. Like it was a fun rest area with like a water slide, but like this is the actual next stop on this journey. Because to your point, like the fact that they kind of reference the initial framework of the first show to be like, hey, you remember this? Cool. Now we're going here. And you're like,
well, and
okay,
it benefits them for the eventual series reveal to
Mm-hmm.
remind people of what exactly the spell was, how it worked, how it created this fictional existence over top of an existing existence.
Yeah, they got to show, not tell. They didn't be like, hey, last time
Yes.
they were just like, hey, there's this thing, this is what it does. Cool, you got it. All right, let's go. And that's pretty, and then you were just off to the races after that. So again, like I feel like the getting the writer or getting the writer heavily involved to move the story forward in that way. Like even Loki season 2, like love that. It's one of my favorite Marvel things that I've seen in a while. But in the beginning it was very rough. Like you're like, ooh, this kind of feels weird. Like I don't like what's happening. And it's because they weren't really planning on doing a season 2. So they kind of had to like finagle the things to set up to give themselves a foundation. And it's like, okay, here's our foundation. Let's go. And man, did they tell a story after that. And like with WandaVision or with Agatha All Along coming from WandaVision, they could just naturally be like, okay, here is the next chapter of this story. And I think they killed it. I think they did a good job giving you more of what you wanted, but giving you a lot of new stuff that builds the Marvel universe out.
It was clear from watching WandaVision that Catherine Hahn could have her own show.
Yeah.
That she is
Yeah.
clearly like an untapped gem of near infinite potential. And based on the strength of her performance in WandaVision, I would absolutely tune in to see a show that was all about Agatha, which is what I did. And I was not disappointed.
We also need a show for my boy Evan Peters, because man,
Yeah.
twice now.
Yeah.
He was great. He was great he was great in this show. Oh, I love. He was just like that weird, like paranoid guy in the parking lot.
Yeah,
Like,
it was
that
so
was
Yeah.
so
good.
good.
It's like
That
your
was
version of Deep
yeah.
Throat.
And the thing is, like, that's what would happen. Like, if you were I love when they kind of show the ramifications of all
Yeah.
of these magical godly figures interacting with normal people. And it's like, yeah, if you were controlled by an evil witch, you would be not okay. You would be so far off the deep end of like getting every superstitious thing you could, because like in your mind, how do you know it's real or not? Because magic exists. So,
Right.
you're not gonna be like, oh, this is bullshit, whatever. Like, no, like it could be real. So you might as well pay $20 for the infomercial to get whatever can help you. It's I like that. And also all the witches. Like they did such a good job of being like, yeah, I'm a health guru person. And it's like, I guess that's what a potions witch would be, I guess. Like,
Well, especially since she had been bound, right?
mm-hmm.
So she couldn't practice magic. So she
Mm-hmm.
was doing the next closest thing that she could do. And I think that's actually a good transition to talk about the other witches. We will talk about Agatha quite a bit throughout this. She is the woman of the hour. And I definitely have a lot of questions for y'all about this character and how you felt about her all the way through, because I felt like it was a total roller coaster. But I really want to hear, apart from Agatha, did any of us have a favorite witch in the coven?
It's hard. They were all great.
Mm-hmm.
They were like these awesome women, and Joe Locke, just did a fantastic job portraying these characters, having them go on a journey together. It felt like a lived-in or real, coven, even though the characters were meeting each other for the first time. You believed it. You believed the relationships, and that's all I ever want out of acting. And I thought each character was different, distinct. I really like Jen,
Mm-hmm.
the character of Jen, played by
Yeah.
Sashir Zamata. I found myself laughing the most at Jen's comments. I think, either by design or not, but there's no weak link.
Mm-hmm.
Even the brief period of time Mrs. Hart is part of the
Oh,
coven.
justice for Mrs. Hart.
Justice for Mrs. Hart.
She was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Deborah Jo Rupp.
She
Like,
she was great.
Yeah.
Honestly, it kind of makes sense why they kind of had to get her out of there, because a lot of times she was stealing the show. Like a lot of times, like, oh, this
Oh
is your show
yeah,
right
that's
now.
so
Like,
yeah. In the first trial where they had to drink the
Yeah.
wine.
yeah, she's just like, I've had
Yeah.
a day.
Or even the way she's like tiptoeing behind them, like
Mhm.
it's like the final scene in the the second episode or whatever. Like she's like, I don't know why I'm here, but I guess I'm going down this road.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like her attitude was like she was just killing it. Like I love how she's
Mhm.
just like when she's like, guys, this is kidnapping. I hope you know that. And then she just keeps on going like, oh. And then like when they're in that like really fancy house and she's like, "Oh, bury me in that kitchen." I'm like, that is like that's so funny.
Well,
And that was a nice kitchen. That was a very nice kitchen, but it's it's she was great. She was great. I did like her a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's fabulous.
Yeah.
Pam, you
Yes.
liked Lilia, right?
I did, but it was actually on reflecting on the season as a whole that I loved the way that they built her story, and you really didn't realize like what they were building up to until you got to her episode. And so for that reason alone, I just thought that the storyline that they created for her was so well done and way more compelling than I think I thought we were going to get in terms of like an origin story for her, just because it like, you really got like the full scope of like what her entire life had been like and why she was like kind of crazy. She had all these crazy outbursts, and the fact that she's just been living her life out of order because she has the foresight to see what's coming is like, I thought that was really interesting. But I don't think that I don't think that I appreciated her character until we got to that episode.
Her episode was so good.
Oh,
So
man.
good.
I loved Lilia's episode. And
Yeah.
you're so right. The concept of someone who is not like their conscious is not a linear progression. She hops around throughout time, not even just within the space of these trials, but just within her entire life. And Patti LuPone just killed
what a
it.
queen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
I've also, just
fabulous.
as an aside, like watching her do the press tour for this show has been such a joy.
I
Mhm.
know.
Anybody that knows like anything about Patti LuPone knows that she's like an unapologetic diva, and she's just gonna like say whatever she wants to say.
Mhm.
But adding that context into having her also talk about like Marvel was
Mhm.
just such a treat. So it's a
Well,
fun little like bonus if
and,
you guys
you
are
know,
still
she
like
is
wanting
also
more content now that the show's
and also
over.
Patti LuPone being, you know, obviously an icon and a woman of a certain age that you don't usually see cast in quite a role. And then just seeing her thrive, seeing her character be
Mhm.
one of the best ones, and just, you know, really enjoying the story and the acting that's being done is immensely satisfying. And I feel like Catherine Hahn is very much that way as well. You know, sort of always having been the best friend character in romantic movies, and
Mhm.
and never really getting that starring role before. You know, all of this talent is just sitting there waiting to be optimized and utilized, and a show like this really brings that forward.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
to your point, I think that it is great that they gave Patti LuPone that much screen time, and it kind of leads me to, and like not to bring Sony into this because Sony's a whole nother can of worms with their Marvel adjacent movies,
Mm,
but for Madame Web, right? Madame Web is supposed to be a crazy old lady that is hunting down Spider-Man to be like, you gotta abide by the web of fate. And it's like, okay, whatever, crazy lady, like crazy old lady, get out of here. They did not need, what's her name from 50 Shades of Grey? What was
Dakota
Dakota,
Johnson.
Johnson,
yeah.
Dakota Johnson? They did not need to make her Dakota Johnson. Like, you could have had a person that actually matched Madame Web's age. Like, honestly, Patti LuPone could have been Madame Web. Like the way that her story is, how like broken and fragmented it is, and how it kind of causes her to like kind of like lose herself, and you're questioning her sanity a little bit.
mm, mm.
It made me so upset because I'm like, man, they literally just did Madame Web better. If this one character, they're like, here she is, there you go. Here's a
Mm.
really well put together, and also like kudos on the writing because it's so hard to write a script where you are planting those little moments retroactively in earlier episodes to then call back and make a cohesive story to all wrap up in that like what third to last episode
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
or something.
No, the
Mhm.
only
Like,
thing the only time I saw anything done half as well was Haunting of Hill House, bent
Yeah.
neck lady
mhm.
reveal, which won't say anything more, but the way in which those stories peppered over great periods of time and were spent a whole season being set up is just amazing.
And like you're right, I think that's probably the closest I can think of. I gotta give this one more credit though because there's actual lines of dialogue that they
Yes,
have to
that they
go
have
back.
to have
Mm-hmm.
be cohesive,
Yeah, and
call and
Yeah.
Yeah.
answer,
mhm.
response, causality, you know, just
Yeah,
absolutely insane.
and then you realize that all her outbursts had like specifically had things to do with the tarot reading, and I'm like, oh man, you guys cooked with this.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
you
It was
guys were,
Yeah.
so good.
yeah. This was their like,
Yeah.
okay, let me just roll up my sleeves real quick and let me just.
Mark, can I ask really quick before we move on, like how much of like the show like exists actually in the comic books? Like, do these characters actually exist apart from Agatha
Yes,
and
but
Teen?
they are very different, which is
Okay,
pretty common for Marvel for the
for sure.
MCU. Uh, Usually the MCU does a better job. Like Wanda in the beginning, like when we first saw Wanda in Age of Ultron, no, Winter Soldier. At the end of Winter Soldier, we saw Wanda. She was the after credit scene with Quicksilver. Um, that was kind of poorly done in the movie because like that was kind of Marvel with their hands tied. In the comics, they're mutants, and like Marvel couldn't use mutants
Yeah.
because of the whole
Right.
Fox thing, so they kind of had to like make some story that kind of works. And now they, because of WandaVision, they've kind of opened that back up to be like the power was in her all along, and the Infinity Stone woke it up, and yada yada yada. So they're kind of leaving the door open to do that. But the Salem 7 are in the comics, but they're way different. Jen's in the comics, I'm pretty sure she's related to Ghost Rider. Like she has something to do with
Interesting.
Ghost Rider's mythos. And a bunch of them are. So the story itself does not play out like that, but those characters do exist in some kind of capacity. Speaking of characters in that, my favorite person in the Coven was Rio. Like,
You took
Oh, yeah.
mine.
she was so
Yeah, she's
good.
good too.
She was so
Listen,
good.
justice for Alice, okay?
Yeah.
Eliane is like
yeah.
Yeah.
gets kind of a bum rap during the show,
They-
but I liked her as much as everyone else.
Yeah.
They did her dirty. They did. Like,
But
and-
Aubrey Plaza.
yeah, and it's funny because even
Yeah.
like even Rio kind of gives her shit where she's like, "You died saving somebody, right?
Yeah.
Seems like you did the thing you had to do." And I'm like, "Ooh, damn, Rio,
Yeah.
Rio, come
Yeah.
on, man!" Like,
You're a protection witch.
yeah, I'm like
Yeah.
giving her shade like that, man. All right, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that also, I think, says something about the reveal that we get about who Rio really is. She's
Mhm.
not just the Green Witch, but she, because we are doing spoilers here, she is death.
Mhm.
And it makes so much sense that the embodiment of death would have a much more clinical outlook on it. To say like, well, everyone dies. That is the one thing that you all have in common, and you actually served a purpose. You did the thing that you were supposed to do, so good job.
Yeah, from her perspective, like
Yeah.
what more could you want out of life? And it's like, well, she had just broken the spell, on her family. She wanted more time.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because that's not the first time somebody has asked death for more time,
Mhm.
as we see. But what death will and won't give is very subjective. And, speaking of which, Rio's relationship with Agatha, the whole series. I mean, she's not in every episode, but I think that was smart
Yes.
to kind of pepper her throughout. But we get an on-screen kiss between
Mhm.
Agatha and Rio, and it was pleasant to not have that just be, well, it was pleasant to have it explicit and not be more sort of queer baity
Mhm.
kind of a line of dialogue here, but full-on kiss, good for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, we also we got a full-on kiss for Teen and his
Boyf.
boyfriend.
That's
Boyf.
right.
Yeah.
Boyf, right,
The
as he was
boyf.
labeled in the phone.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I was honestly surprised to see
Yes.
Disney do not one but two actual
The-
on-screen kisses
Gay
between gay
kisses.
couples. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
good job.
the only thing I will say about the one with Teen, and we can get into this when we start talking more about Teen, I guess, but the age of how things worked out.
Yeah.
They do address that in a kind of offhandy way, which I appreciate, but at first I was like, I don't know about this. How old is this person? Like, how old is the person that's actually, there? But
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
we will get to that
We will
in
get
just
there.
a moment. Actually, we do need to do a quick break for Marc to reference some of his comic book source material to make sure that he's keeping us all in the straight and narrow in terms of what's actually comic accurate and what is not. So while we do that, listen to these sponsors. And we're back. As promised before the ad break, we're going to talk about Teen now. This is a really big one because I think there's so much tied up in this. It's the reveal of Teen's identity. It's also the reveal of why the teen even wants to go down the witch's road. It also later becomes relevant to think about, why did Agatha actually want to go down the witch's road? Her motivation was she wanted to go down the witch's road to get her powers back. And why does Teen want to go down the witch's road? Why is his identity important to knowing the answer to that question? I'm being a teacher now.
Okay.
Ooh, me. Well, The mythos of the Witch's Road, which is the origins are shown in the final episode, has become it's not only a banger song, as it turns out. We find out who made it and who popularized it, same person, and why they popularized it, and how really finding out that up until this point it was fake and non-existent and did not exist before Teen willed it into existence with his familial trait is such a joy to see. And Agatha just coming along, getting sort of a new lease on life, the ability to actually travel this road that she invented more or less, but somebody else's entire creation. And then to learn more about each of her companions, we hope possibly feel for her companions, possibly get some humanity in there. Question mark, as far as whether that actually plays out. But the impetus for it was, I think, brilliant. How everything is linked.
Yes, I agree. I also love how, like you mentioned earlier, where they do hold your hand a little bit, but they give things enough time to cook for you to like make those connections first, and then a couple of episodes later, like, okay, for everybody who else isn't here yet, here is the thing. Like, it was very clear early on that the Witch's Road was pulling from Teen's room.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, you could
Mhm.
see the things like, oh, there's the trees,
Yeah.
there's the Alice in
There's the
Wonderland
Wizard of
stuff.
Oz stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, and even like, and Agatha even said like, oh, it suits you, and it's like,
Like,
oh,
you're
and
so much like your mother.
yeah, and even like when they first got on the road, Agatha was like, oh, this whole vibe suits you, and it's like, yeah, because she probably knew.
She's
I
the
mean,
only one that knows that it's not real, because it was
exactly.
Yeah.
a farce all along.
And that's why when Rio got there, she was like, "Oh, this is the Witch's Road, huh?" And it's like, if she's deaf, she would know what the Witch's Road is. So the fact why she was kind of like, "Oh, this is cute, this is cool," and she was kind of like just frolicking along, because she knew it's like, "Oh, this isn't real. Somebody just made this. Cool, I guess, but I'm just gonna do death things over here, you know." But I I really like how they set everything up, because there are almost every episode Agatha dropped something that it makes it clear of things to come. Like when they were arguing in the second episode, when they were trying to do the lyrics to the song, and Agatha gets the lyrics wrong, and they're like, no, 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 this is the song. This is how it goes. And Agatha's like, no, I'm pretty sure it's this. And they're like, oh, whatever. And it's like, nah, she made it. She does know
Yeah, she's
you
like,
guys
I
have been,
wrote the song,
yeah,
bitch.
it's like, you guys have been singing the wrong song the whole time, because she's the one that wrote it. And when it said like Witches 2, it's like, yeah, because it was her and her son. That's why she didn't care about all the rest of them. So it's like little breadcrumbs like that. If you watch it again, you're like, oh, they were telling us this the whole time. They like they weren't like, hey, it's not like they show the thing, the camera zooms in like, ooh, it's like, nah, like it's there. If you see it, cool. If not, we'll get you there later. Like that was great. I loved it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the inclusion of everything with Agatha's son also made this story a lot richer. Pam, you called it out as a really great red herring.
Yeah, because at the point where, like Marc was saying, when she says you're so much like your mother, you're already thinking like, is she talking about herself? Like, because there's some darkness in there that we're starting to see now that they're out on the road. And the fact that she, there's just like so much that they're doing to like nudge you in that direction. But then they also like, they have Rio say that's not your son. But then but they do such a good job of like setting it up for you to believe that you almost don't believe Rio when she does say that.
And the thing about death is a lot of things, but death doesn't lie. She didn't lie once the whole time. She told the truth the whole time, because she's deaf. Like that, why would she need to? She doesn't need to lie. She's going to get what she wants eventually, so she's like, okay, well.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that is so interesting about it, because you do get this like duality of Agatha's character throughout. And this was what I was referring to when I said it felt like a roller coaster, where it was like, oh, I kind of feel empathy for Agatha. Like they're really like deepening her character and developing her. And it felt like at every turn they were like, psych,
Yep.
It's
I'm
in
kidding.
like it's in the title, bitch. It was
Yeah.
Agatha
Yeah.
all along.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
Agatha's not that bad. Rip Alice. Agatha's not that bad. Seeing her just murk people left and right on the road. And I'm like, geez, Agatha, like, calm down.
The only one I haven't squared is Lorna Wu, who
Mhm.
presumably disappeared on the Witch's Road or trying to get to the Witch's Road, knowing that she probably just ended up one of Agatha's victims. I can't quite.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
You know,
think
you don't
that's what we're
quite have
supposed to
time.
think.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
quite have time to reckon all of the murder that Agatha would have done over the years.
Mhm.
She is not a hero. She is
No.
not a good person.
They make that very clear.
No.
Yeah.
Very clear.
But the thing that
but
I
then they have her kind of like redeem herself because
Yes.
she doesn't take all of Teen's powers. He's like, don't
Yes.
take all of it, and that's like the first time she shows restraint.
Hmm. And the thing is, like, I think that is the mark of good writing, because
Mhm.
we want to paint things in good and bad, right? Like, Agatha's a villain, so everything she does is going to be bad. And it's like, no, like, technically she is a mass murderer, right? She's killed, or actually she's a serial killer at this point. Actually,
Yeah.
she is a
Yeah.
serial killer, but like, she does do good things. That doesn't make her a good person, right? Like, bad people can do good things. And I guess that's kind of the vibe. It's like, we're not trying to say that she's a hero. She's not. She's getting her comeuppance throughout the show at various, right? Because, like, even at the end of WandaVision, it's like, okay, you are depowered in a hex. And then for most of the show, she doesn't have her powers. She's just like kind of faking it till she makes it. And then she gets her powers right at the end to fight death. And then we see how that goes. And then, so like, it's not like she's being rewarded for her behavior. She's like, she is paying costs. Like, I feel like we can talk about what happens at the end, right? Well, you said spoilers already.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we've given
I
a
think she
million
gets off
spoiler
easy
warnings.
at the end.
She does. As long as she stays a ghost. If she stays a ghost, I'm like, okay, at least. And it makes sense, because the thing that she said was, I never want to see your face again, to Rio, which would make sense that death wouldn't fully take her because.
Well,
right?
also, Rio said she hates ghosts.
Yep.
So
Yep.
It was very clearly an intentional decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so interesting to see Agatha kind of recognize the magic she's dealing with too. I mean, that's why in the cutback scene, in the penultimate episode, where you kind of see the whole entrance to the Witch's Road scene from a different perspective, and you see Agatha knows exactly who Teen is based on this magic, because she's like, this isn't real, and I know someone else who invented their own reality to get what they wanted out of it. I know who you are. Sigil be damned.
Man, so out of the whole show, and like, I love Patty LuPone, but Catherine Hahn, that scene where you kind of see her, like, everybody runs down the stairs and they're kind of like holding your hand and be like, hey, this isn't supposed to be here. And you kind of see Catherine Hahn looking around, and she kind of looks up at the camera and she's still confused, and she gives that little smirk, and I'm like, oh, top marks. Like, that was so much acting with no words. That was just her face, and you're like, I know exactly what she's thinking in that moment. Like she was really like looking around like, son of a bitch. All right, let's go. Let's have some fun. Like,
when in Rome,
right? Like, oh, that was so good. That was so good. I loved that. And like, I feel like we kind of skipped over poor Billy, but
but he's still Teen.
But Billy, like, what they did with him was very interesting as well. Like, the age thing that I mentioned earlier kind of gave me feelings, because I'm like, you were like 8 in WandaVision, right? So, and you inhabited this new body. So even if it's been like 3 years or something, you're like 11 kissing a 16-year-old. Like, but they established, and even in the flashback, they showed like, hey, Billy and Tommy can alter their age, because they did it in WandaVision. They literally, it was like, you can get this when you're older, and they just, in front of Wanda, just grew up. and they were like,
That's great. I forgot about that.
so it's like they can be whatever age they need to. So like I feel like them being the right age isn't like the soul of Billy can be whatever they need to match, and you kind of saw that when he was looking in the mirror, like, I'm Billy. What was his last name? Billy.
Maximoff?
No, the
Kaplan.
Kaplan. I'm Billy Kaplan.
Yeah, William Kaplan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm William Kaplan, and he kept on saying it over and over. It's like I think that was them like aging him up and like making him, believe that. But like that was great, and I gotta admit, when I first saw Joe Locke in the first few episodes, I was like, this character's acting really weird, and I'm just gonna give it to, like, maybe they're just a younger actor, they're not that experienced yet, I guess they're doing fine. And then after that episode, I'm like, oh, you were acting weird because you were acting as somebody else. Very well done. Like,
it's funny because I love Joe Locke on Heartstopper,
mm-hmm.
and it's not the same character,
No.
Between Teen and Heartstopper. And it's nice to see Billy get, sort of his sass out, I guess,
Yeah.
a little bit more than he would. I was not sure how I would feel about the casting and about that character, and ended up being one of my favorite parts of the show.
And it's great that they gave that like queer representation, because like Billy is that way in the comics. That was not something they just did for great. Like that is a very big storyline in the Young Avengers of Wiccan being with Hulkling, which is a Skrull prince.
Oh.
I think they can check me on that, but yeah, it's like a Skrull prince, and they have a really cute relationship, and I'm like, oh, this is very wholesome. So I don't know if we're gonna get Hulkling. I don't know if that's in the cards, but having Billy be who they are in the comics, be represented in this way, was very refreshing. Like, that was very nice, and it didn't feel. And honestly, they did a way better job showing Billy's like backstory and making an MCU appropriate backstory, because in the comics it's real weird. Like, it's these people are souls of Mephisto, and something happened, but they were actually like Agatha was the midwife. It's a whole thing. Like, it's a weird thing, and for them to just be like, Wanda's magic soul son went into this body right when it was dying. That is
they simplified it
way cleaner,
and
they made a good character moment out of it.
Yes.
Agatha gets to say sometimes boys die.
Mm-hmm.
And that means a lot.
Yep. And I love seeing Joe Locke act differently when he's William, and then when he became, like, you see a very sudden change, and I'm like, man, good job. This dude was killing it. Like,
yeah. Well, I have a question, because you just mentioned Mephisto. I was one of the ones when WandaVision was coming out, I was watching it weekly, and I would also follow that up, chase it down with some recaps, Easter eggs, 100 things you missed in episode 4 of WandaVision. And the big theory that everyone seemed to agree on was that Mephisto was going to show up in WandaVision. They had like his helmet or mask or something.
Yeah.
Never happened.
Nope.
And furthermore, despite being linked to the characters in ways in which you just described, seems like did not show up in Agatha All Along. Where is Mephisto in this mythos, would you guess?
I'd say, I mean, so here's the thing, like the hellscape of Marvel is very very weird. Like, there's like Mephisto, Blackheart, Nightmare. There's a lot of different like big bads of netherworld-esque places. Like, you have Hela, right, from
Kate
Thor.
Blanchett?
Yeah, yes. I
She's
love Hela so
fabulous.
much. She's so great. But you have her. You have Blackheart. You have, which was in Ghost Rider. You have Dormammu, right? Who rules the dark dimension, which, whatever, pretty much synonymous with hell, right? There's a lot of hell, and then there's an actual like Lucifer on so like Mephisto is not just Satan. Like, there's a bunch of different generals or rulers of
Interesting. I mean,
hell.
I'm glad he kind of didn't show up, because
Yeah.
once you introduce the devil,
Yeah.
it changes everything. Like,
I-
introducing death was big enough.
Yes. I think that was a safer bet to introduce Death over Mephisto because Mephisto has like devil connotations. That's harder to market to a worldwide audience. So
Mhm.
it makes sense for Marvel to hold off on that as much as they can until it just naturally fits in the story in some way. I heard, there was a rumor that Mephisto may show up in Ironheart, which of all the shows for Mephisto to make his debut, Ironheart
It's
is
a
not
weird
what
one.
I would not
Yeah.
think that, but you know,
I
whatever, I
mean,
guess.
we did get a Mephisto name drop
Yes.
in Agatha All Along, and that got people excited.
Yes. We got
But
confirmation that Mephisto is an entity in the MCU.
yes,
So,
yes. But honestly, they were like, we can't have two gay kisses and the devil.
yes.
So this is like we gotta pick two, and the third one we'll have to come back to later. Because they were like, we want to be, we want to make money, and unfortunately, the world sucks.
Yeah,
So
they had to fight Bob on that one.
yeah.
Bob's
Oh
like, "Whoa,
God.
whoa, easy,
He's
Mephisto."
like, pump the brakes,
Yeah.
okay? um, well, we want to go ahead and wrap things up for now, but we would definitely love to hear from y'all in the comments. So please let us know things like, where do we think we're going to see Teen, aka Billy, next in the MCU? It's pretty clear that we can expect him, I think, to turn up somewhere. And how do y'all think the adventure is going to play out? Also, let us know, who else from the Marvel Cinematic Universe would you have liked to see show up. Definitely looking forward to chatting with y'all about that in the comments, excuse me. But wrapping things up with this panel here, is Agatha All Along worth the hype?
Yep. 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
super enjoyed it. Marc, I want to ask you quickly, what impact do you think this show is going to have on the rest of the MCU?
I think two things. Well, one thing is they just expanded out magic a lot. So now instead of just sorcerers and just magic being a kind of ambiguous, nebulous thing, they are establishing witches and where their power comes from and how their power works versus sorcerers, right? Because we didn't see any Doctor Strange circles,
Yeah.
right? We didn't see any sigil. Well, we just saw sigils, but not like his runes thing, right? So they're making that a different. So when you see a witch show up now, you will know that they're a witch, right?
Mm.
Like they will show that. Two, um, we get to see more about Billy. We get to see more. Hopefully, we'll see Billy interact with Vision. We'll
And
get to see
Tommy.
Tommy. Exactly. That would be nice. And I think the real thing that they're setting up with this and a lot of these shows is they're queuing up these younger members to make the Young Avengers.
Mm.
Like we got Kate
Yeah.
Bishop. We got Wiccan now. We have a Patriot was in Falcon and Winter Soldier. It was Isaiah Bradley's nephew. Kid Loki was in season 1 of Loki. There's a lot of these like younger people that are like younger analogs to Marvel heroes, Ironheart, right? That they're kind of setting up to be like, oh, they all exist. So if they were to make a team or something, maybe that'll happen in the future. So this is yet another person that they added to that potential pool, and I think Wiccan's a really cool pick. I think Wiccan is like if they do Young Avengers, Wiccan has to be in there because they are like one of the main people in Young Avengers, and that was a very well done character. So I hope we see more of him.
It's nice to know that they had to get something right, and they did by your estimation.
They did.
Awesome. Well, just for quick parting words here, are there any other shows that we think we would tell people, hey, if you like this show, we think you'll love Agatha All Along? What comes to mind for me is The Craft, the movie. And it was so funny because they use scenes from that in the credits for each episode. So that was the first thing that came to mind for me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, those credits were amazing.
Yeah.
I would say the Flanagan verse, definitely Fall of House of Usher and House of Haunting of Hill House. come to mind as being the ones that would be, or even Midnight Mass. Just a good anthology series, or a series with some of the same cast that you'll get to know, and just good storytelling, good character-based storytelling, like at a peak.
Yeah, I'd say I'll cheat and do the easy answer, but I'll say Charmed. Had a lot of Charmed
Yeah,
vibes.
that's
Lot
true.
lot of
That's
Charmed vibes,
true.
especially with Jen.
Yeah,
Lot of that, which was cool,
that's fair.
and also for a more like in-depth one, I would say the earlier Marvel shows like WandaVision. There was a lot of similarities between.
Mhm.
If you liked WandaVision, you'll like Agatha All Along for sure. Had a lot of the same storytelling, same writer, same structure, but different in a way.
Yeah, it's so much like its prequel.
Oh, so it's so much like its mother. And do that weird
That's much better.
that weird two finger flick she did to his face. I was
Oh,
like, "What are you doing?
yeah.
Get away from me!"
Telling him that the Maximoffs have a flair for drama.
I mean,
Like,
she's not wrong.
she is not wrong.
She's not wrong.
They are drama queens for
Yeah.
sure. Well, thanks y'all so much for joining me again for this episode today. Agatha All Along is on Disney Plus now, so be sure to let us know in the comments what you thought of it as a sequel to WandaVision, and where you think this latest entry into the Marvel franchise is going to lead the greater story. Please don't forget to subscribe to What the Hype podcast on YouTube and in your favorite podcast app. And head over to whatthehypepodcast.com for links to our various social channels. We are sharing show highlights every week on social because we are a new show. So your engagement really helps across all of our channels. Really, really helps us out. Again, panel, thank you so much. Marc, thank you for being here as our resident Marvel expert. You never let us down. Definitely keep us on track. And actually, I don't think that you had to actually us at
Nope.
all this episode. So we did good.
Yeah, you're pretty good. You did good. You did good. I'll put it in the tally. The tally.
Yeah, he'll be back to keep us pointed due north. And again, Pam and Eric, great having both of y'all on as well.
Always.
We thank you again so much for tuning in this week. As a heads up, on next week's episode, myself, Pam, and Andrew are going to be back to do a second episode on the Empyrean series. We chatted about Fourth Wing on an earlier episode. Now we're going to be diving into the second installment in the series, Iron Flame. So look forward to that. I know I'm really looking forward to digging in a little deeper on the series with you and Andrew, Pam, because last time we chatted about it, I was not up to speed, and now I am. So I can't wait to talk about it. Awesome. Well, thanks y'all so much, and thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.